Well, the White House says the two men met for around 45 minutes to an hour, but it was the comments that President Trump made before that meeting that has really raised eyebrows. He talked about Russian election meddling with President Putin sitting right beside him. He was asked whether he would tell President Putin not to meddle in the US elections in 2020. He seemed to joke about it, turning to President Putin, wagging his finger and saying, yeah, I will, don't meddle in our elections. President Putin appeared to laugh along with the joke. That, of course, has raised eyebrows among many. Another question that is raising eyebrows is whether President Trump will go to Russia next year. The White House confirming that President Putin invited President Trump to Moscow in May. Now, the White House says that President Trump has not accepted that offer, but if he did, it would be pretty stunning because it would come just 6 months before the 2020 elections. Another aspect of the conversations they had, and they talked about arms control, about Iran, about Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela. Another aspect that may be criticized, though, is that the two men agreed to improve relations.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.